My name is Pearl Whitmore. I am 67 years old. This past Easter Sunday, at my own dining room table, my daughter-in-law lifted my reading glasses from my face in front of 14 people while she read me a brochure for a senior living community. She did it with a smile. She did it the way you hand someone a gift they did not ask for and expect them to say thank you. And she looked around that table while she did it, at 14 people watching, and waited. I did not say anything. I folded the brochure in half and set it beside my plate, and I kept my hands very still, and I finished my ham. But what I did the following morning had been in motion for 8 months. And it ended in a room in downtown Lancaster with a real estate agent, a lawyer's letter, and my son's wife saying the words that took apart everything she had spent 2 years building. Welcome back to Strong Mom Stories, the channel for women who kept their paperwork in order when nobody thought it would ever matter. Drop a comment and subscribe if this is your first time here. My husband Earl and I bought the house on Kellner Road in Strasbourg in March of 1993. We paid $162,000 for a colonial with a front porch that sagged a little on the left side and a kitchen that had not been updated since approximately 1974. Earl was an electrician. I was 14 years into my career as a title examiner at the Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds. We had one son, Joel. He was 12 years old, and he was, on the whole, a good kid. Earl died on a Saturday in September 2 years ago. Aneurysm, in the garage, looking for a socket wrench. He was 69 years old, and he had never spent a single night in a hospital in his life. And then he was gone in one afternoon. I moved through that house for the first 6 months the way you move through a museum. Careful and quiet, and aware that everything around you belongs to someone who is no longer there to protect it. His chair at the kitchen table. The socket wrench still on the workbench where they found it. His reading glasses on the nightstand, which I have not moved. I should tell you what I did for 31 years, because everything that came later depended on it. In the fall of 1979, when I was 24 years old, I was hired as a clerk typist at the Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds. I typed legal descriptions onto index cards and filed them in alphabetical order and did not think much beyond that. My supervisor at the time was a woman named Eugenia Burr, who was 52, who wore her hair pinned back every single day, and who was the most methodical human being I have ever encountered in my life. On my third day, she pulled a chair up beside my desk and said this: "Write the date and the time on everything you handle, not just the document. Your notes, your memos, the sticky note you leave on someone's coffee mug, date and time, every piece of paper that passes through your hands. Because memory is not evidence. Paper is evidence." I did that for 31 years. In 2010, they promoted me to senior title examiner. I reviewed deeds, liens, easements, encumbrances, chain of title defects. I caught a forged deed in 2014 that would have displaced a woman of 80 from the house she had owned for 53 years. I had spent 3 decades watching what happened to people who did not read their own paperwork, who trusted a folder and a person standing in their kitchen and signed where they were told to sign. I retired in June of 2020. 31 years. A certificate from the county commissioner, and a card signed by 42 people, and a very small pension that I am not complaining about. 2 months after Earl was buried, my daughter-in-law called. Her name is Sandra. She is 40 years old, and she manages a dental billing practice in Ephrata, and she is extraordinarily good at framing a decision as a concern. She did not ask whether she could start taking on some of my household management. She asked whether I had anyone helping with the upkeep, because a property like this takes a lot out of a person, mom, especially alone, especially in winter. That was the first question. The second one came 4 months later in a voice I have come to understand very well. "Mom," she said, "what happens to the house if you ever, can't manage on your own?" I told her I had it handled. She said, of course. And there was that warmth in her voice, that particular careful warmth, and I was only in that October beginning to understand the exact shape it had. Here is what Sandra did not know. In the spring of 2021, when Earl's diagnosis had changed, and we both finally understood the word terminal, in the way that word requires you to understand it, I called a woman named Claire Hobson. Claire is 61, practices elder law on North Queen Street in Lancaster, $325 an hour, worth every cent. I spent 3 hours in that office. I came home with a revocable living trust. I transferred the Kellner Road property into that trust the following month, properly recorded with the county. Earl and I were co-trustees. When Earl died, I became the sole trustee. The trust is a separate legal entity. It owns the house. I govern it. No transaction involving that property can be authorized by any instrument other than my written consent as trustee. No power of attorney, no matter how broadly worded, reaches trust assets without a court proceeding in Pennsylvania. I did not tell Joel. I did not tell Sandra. The honest reason was not strategy. It was that I was managing Earl's last months and I was exhausted, and it had genuinely not occurred to me that I would one day need to protect my home from my son's wife. That was my failure. I have sat with it. Thursday, February 20th of this past year. Joel arrived with a manila envelope and his coat still on, which is what he does when he intends to be quick about something. "Mom, I need you to sign some paperwork. A general power of attorney, just so I can help you manage your affairs. Bank account things, in case something happens." I had not been in a hospital since a knee replacement in 2019. I walk with a cane in icy weather. My mind is entirely, completely fine. I sat at the kitchen table. I took out my reading glasses. They are tortoise shell frames, heavy, prescription, plus 2.5. I have worn the same style since 1992, and Sandra has told me twice, in that gentle way of hers, that they age me considerably and that I should look into something lighter. I put them on and I read every page of that envelope. It took 22 minutes. Joel stood at the counter the entire time and did not sit down. It was a durable general power of attorney, 11 pages. It authorized my son to conduct real property transactions on my behalf. No limitation clause, no sunset provision. In plain language, the broadest instrument Pennsylvania law allows. I picked up my pen and I signed. I dated it February 20th, and before I handed it back, I opened the small spiral notebook I keep in my cardigan pocket, and I wrote 3 lines. Date. Time, 3:41 p.m. and 1 sentence describing exactly what I had just signed. Then I looked up. "You're still keeping that old notebook," Joel said. "Habit," I told him. He took the folder and left. I heard his truck back out. Then I went to the kitchen and I called Claire Hobson at 7:15 that evening and left her a message. She called back the next morning. She confirmed what I already understood. A general power of attorney grants authority over an individual's personal assets. It does not reach assets held in trust, because the trust is its own legal entity with its own governing document, and the trustee's authority flows from that document and nothing else. Joel's power of attorney gave him no more access to the Kellner Road property than the signature of a stranger would. She said, "You let him bring this to you on purpose." I said, "I let him bring it because Eugenia Burr told me in 1979 to never sign something I hadn't read all the way through, and to write the time beside my signature, and I wanted to know what the folder said, and I wanted the date on record." Claire told me she would stay available. I said I would be in touch. Easter Sunday, April 20th. Joel and Sandra arrived at 10 in the morning with Sandra's mother, Fern, who is 63 and newly retired from medical billing. Also Sandra's cousin Darren, whom I had met exactly twice at holiday gatherings, who ate quietly and looked at his plate. My granddaughter Haley, 15, who sat beside me from the moment she arrived and passed me the bread basket without being asked once. 4 neighbors from down the road who had nowhere else to go, because that is how my table has always worked. Fern sat at the head of the table. That has been Earl's seat since 1993. For nearly 2 years after he died, I had not moved the place setting from it. Then last Thanksgiving, Sandra adjusted things to fit the extra leaf, and no one said anything, and the chair became available, and Fern sat in it. I was placed at the end near the kitchen doorway. "It's easier for your knee, Mom," It is easier for my knee. The chair by the kitchen is 12 fewer steps to the bathroom, and I would not have chosen it myself, but it was not wrong. That is the thing about sentences like that. True enough that you cannot argue with them. Arranged carefully enough that you are not expected to try. Dinner was good. The ham was mine. I had been told 3 weeks ahead not to cook anything, but the ham is something I have made every Easter for 38 years, and I made it anyway, and nobody objected because it was good, and they ate all of it. At around 2:30, Sandra stood up with her wine glass. She waited for the table to quiet. A table always quiets for someone holding a glass. "This family has been through so much," she said, "and Joel and I have been doing a lot of thinking about how to make sure Mom is really taken care of. We found this wonderful place just outside Lancaster. Meadowbrook Senior Living. Independent living, Mom, not a nursing home. They want us to be clear about that. A pool. A library, activities every day." She reached into the bag by her chair and produced a brochure. Glossy. Silver-haired people on the cover smiling at something outside the frame. "Here," she said. "You won't need to squint at the fine print. Let me just read you the highlights." And she reached across and lifted my reading glasses from my face. Just took them away with 2 fingers, the way you'd pick up something left on the table by accident. I want to be careful here, because this is the part people misread. I have worn those glasses at every professional moment that mattered. I wore them the day I caught the forged deed in 2014, the day I signed my retirement papers. The morning I read Earl's oncologist's letter for the first time, sitting alone at the kitchen table. Sandra has said they age me and suggested I update the frames. What she could not have known is that to me those glasses are not an embarrassment. They are 31 years of professional vision. She picked the right object to remove. She had no idea what it means when I put it back on. I sat with my hands in my lap and I let her read. Fern clapped once at the end, gently, like a school presentation. Joel looked at the centerpiece. My granddaughter Haley went very still and looked at her plate. "We put down a deposit on Unit 108, Sandra said. Ground floor, its own entrance. We were thinking a spring move gives the house time to go on the market over summer when things are active. The proceeds will give the family some real breathing room." "That is the plan, Mom." "That is the plan," said the way you say something decided in a room you were not invited to. Joel did not look at me once from 2:30 to 6 in the evening. My son is 44 years old. He sat 9 feet away from me in his childhood home for 3.5 hours and found everything in that room worth looking at except my face. Haley carried my plate out at 5 o'clock and came back and stood beside my chair without saying anything. Just stood there with her hand on the back of it. After a minute, she said, "Grandma, do you want to come see what I'm reading?" We went and sat in Earl's study for 40 minutes, and she told me about her book, and I let the room behind us go on without me. They left at 7, 3 car doors, and then the lane went quiet. I went and retrieved my reading glasses from the sideboard where Sandra had set them. I put them on. Then I sat at the kitchen table and I opened my notebook. I did not cry. I have cried at things that deserved it. Earl's last week. The morning after his service when the house was clean and silent, and I understood it was going to stay that way. I did not cry about a woman taking my glasses and reading me a brochure. What I felt was something I recognized from 31 years at the recorder's office. A file submitted incorrectly, dates that didn't align, an instrument that would not hold in court, the flat, clear feeling of something that is wrong in a way that can be written down and fixed. At 8:15, I made 4 lines in my notebook. Then I left it on the table where I would see it in the morning. The Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds opens at 8:30. I was there at 8:44 on April 21st. I know where to park. Donna Szymanski has worked that office for 23 years. She was a junior clerk when I was senior examiner. She is one of the finest title researchers this county has, and she looked up when I walked in and said, "Pearl." And I said, "I need to pull a property history." And she said, "Sit down, let me get you some coffee first." I gave her the parcel identification number for the Kellner Road property. I have known it by heart since 1993. She pulled it up. We looked at the transaction history together. The trust instrument properly recorded, March 2021. Trustee designation, my name only. Everything exactly as Claire Hobson had written it. Then Donna said, someone ran a preliminary title search on this parcel 7 weeks ago. February 7th. 13 days before Joel came to my kitchen with the power of attorney envelope. The requesting party was a real estate agency, Carlisle Home Group, small regional firm, office on Fulton Street, residential listings in Lancaster and Lebanon counties. I wrote the name in my notebook. Date, April 21st. Time, 9:03. I called Claire Hobson that afternoon. The following Thursday, I sat in her office for 90 minutes and wrote a check from my personal account. She confirmed what I already knew but needed on the record from someone who stands before judges for a living. The property was not mine the way that power of attorney assumed. It was the trust's. Joel's instrument could not authorize a sale of trust assets, not without a court proceeding, not without my written consent as trustee. She said, when the listing agency runs their title check before they go to market, they'll find the trust. I said, I want to be in the room when they do. She looked at me, the way people look when they're deciding whether to talk someone out of something. Then she filed a notation with the county. Any inquiry about that parcel, report to me within 48 hours. 3 weeks later, Sandra called. She had arranged a meeting with a helpful person from a real estate agency just to walk us through our options. Mom, no pressure at all, and she thought it would be nice to do it at the house since that's what we were talking about. She asked if Tuesday the 13th worked. I said it did. Then I called Claire Hobson. Then I went to my filing cabinet in Earl's study, opened the folder marked Kellner Road, Trust, and put everything I needed in a manila envelope. Tuesday, May 13th. Joel and Sandra arrived at 10. The agent, Phil McGuire from Carlisle Home Group, arrived 4 minutes after. Laptop. Comparative market analysis. The practice calm of someone who has sat through many family conversations and knows to wait before speaking. Sandra sat at my kitchen table without asking. She set her bag on Earl's kitchen chair. Joel stood near the back door with his arms crossed. Phil opened his laptop. I sat down last. I put on my reading glasses. Sandra glanced at me. Mom, she said, you wore those old frames. I said, I always wear them when I'm reading something important. Phil McGuire walked me through the listing price range, $310 to $325, and the summer market in Lancaster County. He slid a listing agreement across the table toward me. I let him finish. Then I opened my manila envelope and I laid on the table the trust instrument, the recorded trustee designation, and Claire Hobson's letter of representation. I put them in the order a title examiner would recognize. This property is held in a revocable living trust, I said, established and recorded in March of 2021. I am the sole trustee. No transaction involving this parcel can be authorized by any instrument other than my written consent in my capacity as trustee. Mr. McGuire, your agency ran a preliminary title report on this property on February 7th. You already know this. Phil McGuire looked at his laptop screen. He looked at it for about 4 seconds. Then he closed it. Nobody spoke. Then Sandra's voice went precise and thin in the way it does when a conversation is going the wrong direction. Joel handled all of this in February. You signed the paperwork, Mom. I signed a general power of attorney on February 20th, I said. I opened my notebook, 3:41 p.m. 11 pages. Property held in trust. POA authority does not extend to trust assets. I wrote that in here the same evening and I called my attorney at 7:15 that night. Those are the dates, and those are the times, and they are all in my handwriting. Joel looked up from the back door. Then Sandra said it. She said it quickly, the way people say the thing they did not mean to say when they're trying to correct course without slowing down. We already have a buyer lined up. We told them it would be listed by July. Do you understand what it will cost us to back out now? Phil McGuire looked at the table. He looked at it the way a professional looks at something that is no longer his problem. I said, "What buyer?" And that question opened a silence that Sandra had to fill. She filled it with an explanation that ran about 90 seconds and told me, and Phil McGuire, and my son standing at the back door of the house he grew up in, that Darren, the cousin, the man who had eaten quietly at my Easter table and studied his plate, had connected them to a developer. The deal had been arranged before the family meeting, before the holiday, before any conversation with me at all. The sale proceeds, minus the Meadowbrook deposit, were meant to retire a home equity line of credit she and Joel had taken out against their own property in January. Phil McGuire closed his folder. He said he was sorry for the confusion and that his agency would need to review the situation and be in touch. He left before anyone said another word. I did not watch him go. I looked at my son. He was looking at the floor. He had known about the loan. He had known about the buyer. What he had not known, what neither of them had ever thought to find out, was the trust. 4 years, sitting in a filing cabinet in the study where his father's chair still stands, because Earl liked to sit 17 inches from the radiator, and I have not moved it. Nobody had ever thought to ask a 67-year-old woman with reading glasses she should update and a cane she uses in winter whether she had, perhaps, done her paperwork correctly. They planned around a woman who could be managed. They had not planned around a woman who spent 31 years making sure that when someone's file was wrong, she could write down every reason why and prove it on paper. I want to say this clearly because I have heard it framed otherwise. I did not set a trap. I established a trust because an attorney told me it was the right structure, and I kept it because it remained the right structure after Earl was gone. I signed the power of attorney my son brought me because I read it, understood precisely what it reached and what it did not, and determined it presented no actual risk. And I wrote the time next to my signature because I have done that since 1979, and I am not going to stop. Claire sent Carlisle Home Group a certified letter that week. They withdrew. There was no sale. The home equity line was not retired. I learned the amount of it in June through Mavis, my neighbor, who knows someone at a title agency in Lidditz, because Lancaster County is not a large place and information moves through it accordingly. Joel sent me a text message on the 4th of May. It said, "I should have asked you." That is all it said. I answered it with a letter. 3 paragraphs. The first said I had not been angry with him on the evening he came with the envelope. I had been paying attention, which is a different thing. The second said I was not moving to Meadowbrook or anywhere else that was not my own decision, and that if he needed to talk about the financial situation I would listen, but the conversation would go better if he had spoken to a financial counselor first. The third paragraph was short. It said the house on Kellner Road would go to him when I was gone, in accordance with the trust, with 2 conditions only. That he maintain the property, and that the study where his father's chair sits remain a room with a chair in it for as long as the house is standing. Fern moved back to Harrisburg in June. No one called to tell me. Mavis mentioned it. Sandra has not been in contact since May 13th. I expect that will change eventually. People who have planned something for a long time do not always accept the first closed door. But the trust is recorded. The letter is on file with the county. Claire Hobson has copies of everything, dated and time-stamped, in the order a judge would want to read them. On the second Saturday in June, Haley showed up at my front door with a library book and a box of lemon cookies she had apparently remembered me mentioning in December. She had taken 2 buses and walked the last quarter mile up Kellner Road. She did not tell her mother where she was going. We sat on the porch for 3 hours. She asked me what a title examiner actually does, what a trust is, how you find a problem in a deed when you're not sure what you're looking for. I told her about Eugenia Burr and the index cards and the habit that has followed me for 46 years. Date and time on everything, every piece of paper that passes through your hands. She asked why I still use a paper notebook when everything is on phones now. I told her, a phone can be taken, a notebook in your pocket is yours. She was quiet for a minute, thinking about that. Then she looked at me. "Grandma," she said, "is that why you still wear those glasses?" Even though she caught herself, even though you've had them forever? I looked at her. 15 years old, sitting on a porch in the June light, asking exactly the right question. I put my reading glasses on. I told her, yes, exactly that. People see an older woman with a cane and out-of-fashion frames and a spiral notebook that hasn't been manufactured since 2003, and they see someone who needs to be simplified. A house to be listed, a unit to be reserved, an instrument to be signed, while the person who brought it stands by the door with their coat on. They see glasses that can be lifted from a face in front of 14 people without a word of objection. What they do not see is 31 years of reading what no one else thought to read. A trust that has been sitting in a filing cabinet since 2021. A woman who has been writing the date and the time on everything since a 52-year-old woman pulled up a chair beside her desk and told her that memory fades and paper holds. She was right. It held. If you are watching this from your own kitchen tonight, go find your deed. Read it. Find out whose name is on it, what structure the property sits in, and whether anyone has been added to any account or instrument in your name in the last 5 years without you fully understanding what that meant. Do it before someone else decides to do it for you. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.